Welcome to meeting number 2 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Fisheries and Oceans. The committee is meeting to discuss committee business. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format. I would like to start the meeting by providing you with some information following the motion that was adopted in the House on Wednesday, September 23rd, 2020. The committee, of course, is now sitting in a hybrid format, meaning that members can participate either in person or by video conference. Witnesses must appear by video conference. All members, regardless of their method of participation, will be counted for the purpose of quorum. The committee's power to sit is, however, limited by the priority use of House resources, which is determined by the party whips. All questions must be decided by a recorded vote unless the committee disposes of them with unanimous consent or on division. And finally, the committee may deliberate in camera, provided that it takes into account the potential risks to confidentiality inherent to such deliberations with remote participants. The proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website, so you are aware the webcast will always show the person speaking rather than the entirety of the committee. To ensure an orderly meeting, we would like to outline a few rules to follow. For the purpose of participating virtually, members and witnesses may speak in the official language of their choice. Interpretation services are available for this meeting. You have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either Floor, English, or French. Before speaking, click on the microphone icon to activate your own mic. When you are done speaking, please put your mic on mute to minimize any interference. Should members need to request the floor outside of their designated time for questions, they should activate their mic and state that they have a point of order. If a member wishes to intervene on a point of order that has been raised by another member, they should use the raised hand function. This will signal to the chair you're in interest to speak and create a speakers list. In order to do so, you should click on participants at the bottom of the screen. When the list pops up, you will see next to your name that you can click raise hand. When speaking, please speak slowly and clearly. Unless there are exceptional circumstances, the use of headsets with a boom microphone is mandatory for everyone participating remotely. Should any technical challenge arise, please advise the chair. Please note that we may need to suspend a few minutes as we need to ensure all members are able to participate fully. For those participating in person, proceed as you usually would when the whole committee is meeting in person in a committee room. Keep in mind the directives from the Board of Internal Economy regarding masking and health protocols. Should you wish to get my attention, signal me with a hand gesture, or at an appropriate time get the attention of the clerk, who will add you to the speaking order. Should you wish to raise a point of order, wait for an appropriate time and indicate to me clearly that you wish to raise a point of order. With regard to a speaking list, the committee clerk and I will do the best we can to maintain consolidated order of speaking for all members, whether they are participating virtually or in person. That being said, the speakers list is now open. Please make your desire to speak known before using the raise hand function or by raising your hand visibly on camera. Mr. Batiste, I believe you had raised your hand first. We will now go to you.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, okay, point of order, Mr. Calkins.
And my apologies to my colleague, Mr. Batiste. I know he wants to get to the point, but Chair, in your initial readout here, you basically said that the committee would wait in order to make sure that anybody experiencing technical difficulties could join the meeting. We spent quite a bit of time at the start of the meeting before we started it to ensure that everybody could be on, and my colleague Dan Mazer from Manitoba is having some technical difficulties and I don't believe is actually on the meeting right now and is trying to use some alternative devices in order to bypass whatever technical difficulties he may be having. And I'm hoping that, Chair, you will show Mr. Mazer, my colleague, the same consideration that we showed others before the meeting started.
Certainly will. Nancy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, we are looking after this. I will leave it up to you, Mr. Chair, if you want to suspend for a second.
Okay, we'll suspend for a moment just to see if they can get Mr. Mazer online so as he can fully participate in the meeting. disconnected or their hand raised in order that I have. Mr. Batiste.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I hope I can go now. And I really feel that I'm going to introduce the motion again. I understand that it's in both languages now, and I introduce the motion that the Standing Committee on Fisheries and Oceans undertake a study to examine the implementation of the Mi'kmaq constitutionally protected treaty right to fish in pursuit of a moderate livelihood, in order to evaluate the current rights and recognition agreement process and identify issues that need to be addressed and a recommended path forward. That the committee call witnesses, including senior officials from Department of Fisheries and Oceans Canada, First Nations, fisheries associations, scientists, and interested stakeholder groups to testify before the committee. That your chair be empowered to coordinate the necessary witnesses, resources, and scheduling to complete this task, and that the committee report its conclusion and recommendations to the House of Commons. Now, Mr. Chair, I know I said this last week, and I think we've all seen what the urgency is. I say this not only as a Mi'kmaq person, but as someone who represents a riding that has a lot of commercial fishermen as well. And so I really feel that we have a urgent situation that needs to be addressed. I hope that we will take a look at this and be able to move forward on an urgent basis and to put the proper meetings that we need to do this. I would suggest no less than 5 meetings to make sure that we're hearing from all stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Batiste. Do I hear any discussion on that motion?
So, Mr. Chair, it's the first hybrid meeting, so I'm not sure how you want to do this, but I see Madam Gill has a hand here.
Okay, Madam Gill, when you're ready.
In fact, I have a proposed amendment to make, if I may. I don't know if I can table that proposed amendment right away. Yes, I may? Good. Well, I agree with Mr. Batiste concerning how important and urgent this is. We know that the Marshall Act dates back a long time, and the Department of Fisheries and Oceans could have settled a number of vague concepts that are at the root cause of the disputes that are problematic right now. So given that we're talking about the Mi'kmaq Nation, but also other nations under the Marshall decision, so I'll read the text of the motion. I'll read slowly for the interpreters and for my colleagues, because I experienced the opposite last week. Things were read very quickly. So I'll proceed. That the motion be amended by replacing the words that the committee call witnesses, including senior officials of Fisheries and Oceans Canada, First Nations leaders, with the words and open quotation marks that the committee solemnly and respectfully invite Mi'kmaq communities to come and share their ancestral and historical knowledge with committee members, and that in the event of positive responses, a minimum of 2 hours be set aside to gather this valuable testimony, that the committee call witnesses, including senior officials of Fisheries and Oceans Canada.
Do we have any discussion on the amendment?
I'm not sure what the amendment is actually, the purpose of it. It's stating, I mean, it's all covered within the current motion that I've put forward. So I'm wondering if there's a reason why. And I'm pretty sure there's a squirrel caught in a trap in the next room. So if you guys are hearing something that.
Okay. Madam Gill, do you want to respond?
Yes. Well, of course, I would like to respond. Well, I think that the whole idea behind the amendment is clear. We're talking about leaders from the First Nations that would appear. And that's quite broad when it comes to these kind of consultative processes, band councils that would enter into these negotiations. Now, in the case that concerns us, the kind of testimony that we would hope to have is folks from the Mi'kmaq and Maliseet nations. For example, in Quebec, there are 9 First Nations, and I don't think that the idea at this stage was to have witnesses from every single First Nation of Canada, but specifically the Mi'kmaq and Alassit nations. So I just thought that was why it behooved me to specify that in the amendment as in this virtual and hybrid meeting.
Okay, any further discussion, Mr. Batiste?
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, Mr. Beach.
Just a question of clarification. On this particular amendment, it wasn't too complex. I was able to follow along with it, and I can get the general just by scribbling it down as we're going. Amendments can get much more complicated than this. Just as a matter of process, are we going to take the time to be emailing out the text of amendments as they go, or how do you see us dealing with amendments going forward in this hybrid process, especially if the amendments are more complex than this particular one?
Well, I would suggest my first thought, Mr. Beach, would be if anybody finds the text complex, is to maybe ask for a moment to review the text of the amendment, and we could suspend to do that, and you could talk amongst your other committee members, whether by text or otherwise, to try and get a wholesome understanding of it. But I think we still, it's a process that we have to learn to adapt to, I think, because going forward, I'm sure we're going to have many times that there'll be amendments added to any particular motion. And if we have to get it in writing then afterwards and explain, we're going to take away a lot of committee time. And I'm hoping to avoid as much of that as possible.
Point of order, Chair.
Yes, Mr. McGregor.
I just want to draw your attention to Mr. Johns being online, and I'll take my leave from the committee now.
Sorry to see you go, sir. But I will welcome Mr. Johns. Any further discussion on the amendment?
Well, Chair, if I may make an intervention, as conservatives, we will be also moving an amendment once this particular amendment's been dealt with. I'm concerned that the depth and breadth of what the committee is being asked to do here is trying to be boiled down into something that's very simple, when in fact it's not simple. I mean, this is this motion is asking the committee to undergo basically an examination of not just this particular instance, because this challenge and the situation that's unfolding in Atlantic Canada right now will be actually setting likely the first steps in the actual definition of what a moderate livelihood is. And as such, I believe that the committee has a responsibility to, if we're going to adopt this motion, I would suggest to you there's no reason to think that the committee wouldn't adopt this motion. We would have, I think, before us a significant task in order to provide some type of clarity, and in order for all parties to have a venue or an avenue to be heard. I'll be moving an amendment after this that would broaden the scope of the amount of people that this committee would invite to talk to about this particular issue, because it involves a lot of people. So while I respect what Madam Gill is putting forward here, I don't think it's in its entirety enough, or going to be enough, to actually make everybody feel that they've had a chance to be heard in this particular matter.
Great, thank you, Mr. Calkins. Hearing no further discussion on the amendment.
Mr. Chair, sorry, I'm the uncomfortable position where I believe Ms. Gill is having a point of order. Hear from the room.
Yes, Madame Gill.
Well, I thought that there was an amendment being tabled without the previous amendment being debated. I just have a question of clarification. Perhaps Mr. Batiste can clarify this. It was my understanding that the objective of the motion was, yes, to discuss the particular case in Nova Scotia, and the Malisit and the Mi'kmaq First Nations, but from what Mr. Colkins is saying, apparently it should be more broad and more open. So I'd like to know where we stand here. For my part, when 5 2-hour meetings are being proposed to discuss an issue that is as broad as having all the First Nations testify, I don't know how that will actually play out. So I'm just a tad surprised by that. Of course, I'd like all First Nations to appear before us, but everything has been already negotiated between the Department of Fisheries and Oceans and the government and the First Nations. So I'd like to understand what Mr. Baptiste's purpose was in that sense.
Mr. Batiste?
Okay. Yes, I think it's very clear that there's a lot of stakeholders involved in what we're talking about. But the key ones that we need in order to define moving forward on this is to be able to speak to the Mi'kmaq themselves, as well as the fisheries associations who are part of this, as well as Department of Fisheries and Oceans, as well as scientists and interested stakeholders. I wanted to keep it pretty broad, but I think 5 meetings would be enough to bring in the leadership from Mi'kmaq and Maliseet communities, as well as hearing from the different associations, as well as hearing from the scientists and DFO, as well as any other interested stakeholders that we can put together in a list. So I feel that this is the way forward, and we should be able to vote quickly on this and stop the delays, because there's lives at stake.
Mr. Cormier.
Well, just to reiterate what Mr. Baptiste just said, and Ms. Gill, if you read the text of the motion itself, it refers to the First Nations in the plural with an S, so I'm sure that does include other groups potentially that may be invited to take part in this conversation. I think that was the objective that Mr. Baptiste had in moving his motion in the first place. So I don't think
the translation over top of the original. I can't hear the translation.
Okay, I make sure you have your computer or iPhone, whatever, set on the language that you're speaking.
I do, Mr. Chair. The original sound was coming in through louder than the interpretation.
I'm actually talking to Mr. Cormier, as he was the person who was initially you could not hear. Sometimes if you're not on the right translation, it'll come through louder than what we're hearing from the interpreters.
Je suis sur le français, monsieur.
I'm on the French channel, Mr. Chair. Can you hear the interpretation? Should I start again, right from the beginning of what I was saying? I just wanted to clarify what Ms. Gill's concerns are regarding her desire to want to include the Maliseet First Nation. If you read the text of the motion, it's in the plural, First Nations with an S. So nothing prevents us, as Mr. Baptiste said earlier, to invite other First Nations to take part in this committee meetings. So I think that it clearly states in the plural First Nations, which in and of itself includes other First Nations, not just the Mi'kmaq Nation. So isn't that what you wanted to say, Ms. Gill? May I respond, please, says Ms. Gill. Well, for the benefit of everyone here, there are 634 First Nations in Canada. So I think that very fact should be included in the amendment, or perhaps in a sub-amendment, where we call for the Mi'kmaq and Maliseet First Nations, and that means including. If we use the word notamment, the translation would be including, and it wouldn't exclude any nations, but it would include those too. As Mr. Baptiste said so convincingly, this is in fact an urgent and concerning matter, and this has to do with the martial order that concerns them. So obviously, as Mr. Cornier said, it is in the plural, but I think we should include the word notamment, i.e. including the Mi'kmaq and Maliseet First Nations, among others. And there was something else important in the amendment relating to Aboriginal knowledge, and that comes from the Truth and Reconciliation report, which dictates that Aboriginal knowledge should also always be factored in, and sometimes even myself as a member of this committee might not be aware of that kind of knowledge that should be factored in. This will enable them to make more well-informed recommendations, and I imagine that there are other colleagues around the table that aren't fully abreast of the culture and knowledge of the Mi'kmaq and Maliseet First Nations specifically.
Thank you. Mr. Johns.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Certainly appreciate my colleague at the committee here bringing forward this motion. I mean, clearly this is a topic that we're all wanting to have a conversation about and make sure we're getting expert opinion. But I guess I'm trying to figure out what the outcome he's looking for. Is he looking for getting an idea of where things have been at? What has the government been doing in terms of, through their government officials, in terms of the delivery of the mandate to accommodate the right that clearly is, protected under the Constitution, and these are treaty rights, so that they can exercise their right, which they're doing
Mr.
now
Johns?
in the moderate living. Yes.
We're dealing with the amendment.
No,
right
I
now,
am. I'm
not
going to
the
go
actual
there. I'm going to
motion.
go. I'm going to go there. I'm going to go there because Madam Gill
Good,
brings
please.
forward a very good point. When we look at, well, it be the Maliseet or the New Chalmouth where I live, or the four big decisions that have again constitutionally protected, inherent rights, whether it be Gladstone, Sparrow, House It Null versus Canada, or Marshall, they are relative. I think it's important that we get an idea of where is Canada at in terms of supporting in accommodating those court decisions, that have been clearly in support of the nations exercising their rights, whether it be a moderate livelihood or their right to catch and sell fish, and the government hasn't been sending their negotiators to the table with a mandate to accommodate the exercising of those rights. And so I am in support of expanding it. But if we do expand it, I think we should have a narrow focus for a few meetings and then expand it in separate meetings, because I too believe that the New Chalmouth would like to be part of this conversation. And I think it's warranted given the situation, because where he's going, what he wants, I believe, and what she wants are actually intertwined. There is an intersect here. And I think there's an opportunity. But we also want to mitigate any sort of conflict in the future in those other communities where they're also looking at implementing their own fisheries plans because of the lack of consultation with the government, the lack of resources provided to the regions to actually negotiate fairly so that they can, earn a livelihood and participate in exercising their rights. And the government has failed to accommodate in every court case. And the amount of money the government's spending would also be of interest to this committee, I believe, in the amount of money they're fighting these nations. So I think it's very important that this study takes place. So I support Madam Gill's push, but I'd like to further expand that, and I hope she's willing to be open to and amendable to her modification and modifying her amendment to expand it to look at and make it more broad. Or friendly amendment to broaden the scope of this study, because I believe it's warranted.
Est-ce que je peux intervenir?
So,
may I respond to Mr. John's comment, please? Thank you very much. Well, sorry, Mr. Chair, I cut you off. Am I okay to proceed? Good. Well, in reaction to what Mr. Johns said, that's what I've precisely done previously, but i.e. broadening the scope. We know that the Marshall decision concerns both the Malassis and the Micmac, and that's why I used the word notamment and entre autres, which means including. It's not to the exclusion of. It means that other First Nations can be included without specifying them, just those two, but without excluding others per se. So, as I said, though, there are 634 First Nations, and I don't think that we can address all the future cases. I'm not being cynical here. I'm trying to be realistic in the space of 5 committee meetings. So, once again, were I to amend the amendment by including the word, using the word notamment, including Maliseet and Micmac, among others. And of course, that way it would give us an opportunity to speak about their culture, their history, and their traditional knowledge. I can repeat that if you want, but I can put it in writing also if you prefer.
Ouais, je peux un amendement, mais je peux en proposer un autre.
I can move a new motion if you wish, or I can amend my amendment.
Mr.
Ce serait à quelqu'un de proposer un contre.
It would be up to someone else to present an amendment to my amendment. In other words, I can't amend my own amendment.
So I have to be very clear that when we talk about the Mi'kmaq right on moderate livelihood, it's based on Marshall decision. Now, the Marshall decision is based on a treaty right, and that is a specific treaty right, 1760-61. If we include Indigenous nations from all crosses of Canada, we muddy the waters a bit on inherent right versus treaty right versus a specific treaty right. So I'm in favor with saying that we include, or notamment, the Mi'kmaq and the Maliseet. Also, Passamaquoddy are part of that, but they're not recognized in Canada as having a band there. So it's the Mi'kmaq and Maliseet as well. And if you want to say Indigenous knowledge as part of this, I have scientists who I'm looking to call who have that Indigenous knowledge, and they're both scientists and have that. But I have no problem with the amendment saying that it's Mi'kmaq and Maliseet with adding an additional Indigenous knowledge stakeholders to the amendment, if that's agreeable. But if we get into other First Nations and other treaties that are outside of the realm of the moderate livelihood, we do a disservice to the current urgency that's going on that we need answers to. And just in the long term, what I'm looking to get from this is a study that hears from the different stakeholders, and for us to move forward on this in a way that they feel that they're heard and they get a chance to say their piece in the Fisheries Committee. So I would hope that that's agreeable to Madame Gill and to MP Johns.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Batiste. Seeing no other, Mr. Arnold.
Moi, je peux peut-être.
Well, if I may, yes, and if I could just conclude, and then we'll move to the vote, and the question can be called. Sorry.
No, actually, Mr. Arnold had his hand up to speak to the amendment, I guess. Mr. Arnold?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess through all of this, still not really certain on what it is that Mr. Batiste is looking to garner out of the motion. It's in the motion, it's things that need to be addressed.
Perhaps, Mr. Arnold, we can deal with that after we deal with the amendment. We'll go to the main motion then as amended. It'll be open for discussion.
No, I think it. Thank you, Mr. Chair, but I think it pertains to how we may consider this amendment. Just for clarification from Mr. Batiste, if he could, is he hoping to that the committee may come up with a definition of the moderate livelihood to help resolve this issue, or is he looking at how we should change the consultation process, or just what it is that the original motion really is aimed at achieving?
Mr. Batiste?
Yes, I don't want to presuppose the destination before we have the journey of having the conversation. What I'd like to be able to do is hear from the various stakeholders, and moderate livelihood is something that's bound to come up, and we will report back our findings. That's what I believe this gives the opportunity to do. And I think it's broad enough to include all those who want to be a part of this discussion in a way that doesn't keep this committee from having an urgent study that moves recommendations forward. That's something that is important, and I think that I've left it broad enough to capture all those who want to be a part of this, but also the focus has to be around the Marshall Decision, the moderate livelihood, and the two nations that are part of this.
Okay, hearing or seeing no other hands raised for an intervention on this, I'll ask for the call of the vote on the amendment to the original motion.
I believe Ms. Gill wants to say something. She's here.
Sorry, Madame Gill.
Yep. Y a pas de faute, on s'adapte. Désolé.
No worries. We're all getting used to this, Mr. Chairman. It's difficult here on my end in the committee room with the screen and all. So basically, what I proposed doesn't constrain or limit the motion per se, because I think at the end of the day, what's what Mr. Baptiste was calling for, to ensure that all Indigenous folks can be heard and share their Indigenous knowledge. That's just a point of clarification. It doesn't rule out other aspects, but it will guarantee that those specific topics will be addressed, as well as moderate livelihood, which of course will be the pith and substance perhaps of clarification, as Mr. Arnold said. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but in any event, an amendment that is rather open-ended, and I don't see how this amendment should be defeated in the sense that we want to make sure that all of these folks have their opportunity to be heard.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr. Calkins.
If there's going to be no other interventions or no other sub-amendments to this amendment, would it be possible, so that I know exactly what I'm voting for, to have the English version of the text as it would appear should the amendment pass?
Okay, I'm sure we can provide that. Mr. Baptiste, you had your hand up.
Yes, I know that Madame Gill cannot amend her own amendment. So what I'm asking for is for people to look at the original motion, and when it says First Nations, to put including the Mi'kmaq and Maliseet, and right before stakeholders to say associations, scientists, and Indigenous knowledge holders. And I think that captures the two things that she was asking in an amendment that's clear, so that everyone knows what they're voting for. Is that agreeable to Madame Gill?
Absolument, Monsieur.
Absolutely, Mr. Baptiste. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
So that will, yes, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Chair, I believe Mr. Calkins asked for a written text. Am I correct?
Yes.
So if I can clarify, if you look at the original motion, you will see that after the Fisheries and Oceans Canada, First Nations, we can put including Mi'kmaq and Maliseet. And then you'll see the comma, it says Fisheries Associations, scientists, comma, Indigenous knowledge holders, comma, and interested stakeholders. So we're only amending that to include the specificity, the Mi'kmaq and Maliseet, as well as to include Indigenous knowledge holders as part of that. And I can read the whole thing for you if anyone would like me to read it all.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Bragdon, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just in regards to what Mr. Baptiste is proposing, I believe incorporating the amendment in large part from Madam Gill. I believe there's one other regional group of First Nations members that have been officially recognized from this region as the Passamaquoddy people. Perhaps that needs to be taken into consideration as well. There are Passamaquoddies.
Mr. Baptiste.
Yes, MP Bragdon, I just want you to clarify which community out of the Atlantic, the 35 First Nations in Canada recognized, includes which one of those communities is the Passamaquoddy?
Well, I understand that I believe that that was recognized in regards to in affiliation with the Marshall decision. It confirmed the rights to Mi'kmaq, Maliseet, and Passamaquoddy. And I know they're closely affiliated with the Maliseet First Nations in our region, but I do believe that they were recognized under Marshall as well.
You are correct, Mr. Bragdon. It does say Passamaquoddy. However, Passamaquoddies, as I understand it from being in the Atlantic and being part of Assembly of First Nations and the APC, they're in the United States and not Canada. And they don't have a recognized community in Canada unless you have information for me that I don't have.
Mr. Bragdon?
No, I don't have any further information other than I do know that it was recognized in the Marshall decision as one of the recognized groups. And I am aware of some First Nations individuals who refer to themselves as Passamaquoddy.
Okay. So am I to assume that Mr. Batiste, you've made a sub-amendment to the amendment?
Yes.
Okay. Nancy, do you have can you read that out so everybody knows what the sub-amendment is?
It is unclear for me if Ms. Gill wants to talk or if it's a confusion with the microphone.
Ben, il allume seul.
Well, the microphone turns itself on by itself, but I did want to speak, so it's reading my thoughts magically. Now, I'm just asking myself a question here. We're contorting the first motion regarding the Maliseet and the Mi'kmaq, so I think that we should deal with my amendment first before we proceed with another amendment. So there you have it. Now, I see that there's no consensus around the table. There's no concrete, clear, objective information regarding Mr. Bragman's remarks. So I'd like to stick to the two First Nations that I referred to, without that limiting per se the whole breadth of other First Nations. And the English version has been sent through to you now.
Okay, thank you, Madam Gill. It's my understanding that we first have the vote on the sub-amendment made by Mr. Batiste, then on your amendment, Madam Gill, as sub-amended, and then on the motion as amended. So hearing no further discussion, we'll vote on the sub-amendment by Mr. Batiste first. Nancy.
Can I just be clear what and read it off for everyone?
Okay, if you would please, Mr. Batiste. Again.
Okay, and I'll do this slowly so that everyone can follow. That the Standing Committee on Fisheries and Oceans undertake a study to examine the implementation of the Mi'kmaq constitutionally protected treaty right to fish in pursuit of a moderate livelihood, in order to evaluate the current rights and reconciliation agreement process and identify issues that need to be addressed and a recommended path forward. That the committee call witnesses, including senior officials from Departments of Fisheries and Oceans Canada, First Nations, including the Mi'kmaq and Maliseet, First Fisheries associations, scientists, Indigenous knowledge holders, and interested stakeholders groups to testify before the committee, that the chair be empowered to coordinate the necessary witnesses, resources, and schedule to complete this task, and that the committee report its conclusions and recommendations to the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Batiste. Hearing no intervention, Nancy, I guess we'll go to a vote on that sub-amendment.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr. Collins.
J'ai une question de procédure.
Yep.
I have a procedural question, says Ms. Gill.
Mais j'ai un appel au règlement.
On a point of order as well.
Has the floor, Chair.
Yes, you do.
Okay, thank you, Chair. just for some clarification, we're dealing with the sub-amendment by Mr. Batiste to the amendment proposed by Madame Gill. I don't know what the outcome of this is going to be. I just want clarification from you, Chair, because I would like to propose an amendment to that section of the motion as well.
Un appel au règlement.
On a point of order, Ms. Gill, here.
Madam Gill.
En fait,
Well, unless I'm mistaken, Mr. Batiste is presenting a sub-amendment to my amendment, or rather an amendment to the main amendment. So I think that normally we would deal with my amendment first and then deal with Mr. Batiste's amendment. Is that not the case?
I understood, and correct me if I'm wrong, Madam Clerk, that Mr. Batiste originally wanted to do a sub-amendment to Madam Gill's amendment. He read it out in its entirety, I know, but it was suggested originally that it would be a sub-amendment to your amendment, Madam Gill. Is that correct, Madam Clerk?
So thank you, Mr. Chair. I do not have the text of all those amendments and sub-amendments, but I believe that Mr. Batiste is just moved a different version of the amendment from Ms. Gill, which is not exactly the same as a sub-amendment. And it is my understanding that it is not exactly a sub-amendment, but Ms. Gill, it's a bit complicated because she's here in the room and you're not, and she seems to insinuate that maybe she would modify, but then I would appreciate if maybe you can let her speak to this.
Yep. Madam Gill.
Well, the changes that Mr. Batiste made are, in fact, in relation to his own motion and not to my amendment. So it's as straightforward as that. I don't know if there's anything else that, well, perhaps I could withdraw my amendment. I don't mind it being defeated so that we end up approving Mr. Batiste's sub-amendment, if that's the easier path to go down. We've sent through the English version in any event with both additions regarding the two First Nations and also Aboriginal Indigenous knowledge. But I am more than prepared to withdraw my amendment in favour of the amendment that Mr. Batiste has put forward on the proviso that we have the written texts so that we can vote on the written texts.
Mr. Chair.
Okay, I don't have the written text of Mr. Batiste. Nancy.
So, Mr. Chair, I'm not sure if you need clarification, but in order for Ms. Gill to withdraw her amendment, and she is willing to do so, the committee would have to agree to that. And if the committee does agree to that, then Mr. Batiste is amendment, which is not sub-amendment, could be voted on.
Do I have the consent of the committee for Madam Gill to withdraw her amendment? Hearing no objection, we'll consider the amendment by Madam Gill withdrawn. Now we'll go to the amendment of Mr. Batiste.
Would you like me to read it out again?
No, I think everybody has heard it 2 or 3 times now.
Okay, if that's the case, Mr. Chair, if I may have the floor, if I can add something to it through a sub-amendment of Mr. Batiste's amendment, we would propose that we also include local authorities. So at some point in time in there, after the Fisheries Association's scientists, let's put in local authorities and interested stakeholders, if that's amenable to the committee. And just prior to the language Fisheries Association, if we could make that non-Indigenous and Indigenous Fisheries Associations, just to be a little bit more inclusive as to who might be on the witness list. I would assume that this would be amenable to Mr. Batiste.
Okay, I see Mr. Batiste with a thumbs up for that, Mr. Calkins. So hearing no further discussion of that, can we vote on the sub-amendment by Mr. Calkins as stated?
Just before, Mr. Chair, before I process to a vote, I would ask if Mr. Calkins can repeat the final part that he just said.
Well,
so I
that
can
would
make sure that I have correct that.
that would be impossible, Chair, because I don't have the text of Mr. Batiste's amendment, even though I understand it to be including the Mi'kmaq and Mala.
Sorry, I meant to see Mr.
Malasite.
Calkins to repeat the last part that you just said.
Well,
And not
I'm
Mr.
looking for adding the two words, a comma after the word scientists, and then putting in 2 words in English, local authorities, and then it would go on to end interested stakeholder groups. And prior to the word fisheries association in that list, quantifying it as non-Indigenous and Indigenous fisheries associations. That would be a sub-amendment that would be in addition to the language that Mr. Batiste put in dealing with the Indigenous knowledge holders, etc.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Batiste.
So if I can clarify, and I think this would be agreed to everyone, and we can move forward, that what we are looking at is the original portion of the amendment, and I just will read off because I am going to get to Mr. Calkins on that as well. But just say the committee call witness, including senior officials from the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, First Nations, including Mi'kmaq and Maliseet, fisheries associations, both non-Indigenous and Indigenous, scientists, comma, Indigenous knowledge holders, and interested stakeholders groups to testify. And so that's, I believe, encompassing everything. And I hope that that's agreeable to everyone, that we can do this by consensus. I see something all parties.
Jaime, did you miss local authorities, or did you have that included?
Okay, that was part of the DFO, but yes, local authorities, I think that I must have missed that. It wasn't intentional.
Yeah, no, that was part of my amendment. So where it goes in the list, it doesn't matter to me as long as it's in there.
Okay.
Okay. So Nancy, some direction, I guess, as to what are we voting on first?
Thank you very much. So, Mr. Chair, this is a sub-amendment. So the modification from Mr. Calkins, has everybody heard the term of the motion, of the sub-amendment?
I'm seeing nodding of heads.
Thank you very much. Pursuant to the motion adopted by the House on September 23rd, the vote on the sub-amendment from Mr. Calkins. Mr. Batiste.
In favor.
Mr. Beach.
I vote in favor.
Monsieur Cormier.
Je vote pour.
I vote in favor.
Mr. Hardy.
I vote in favor.
Mr. Morrissey.
I vote in favor.
Mr. Arnold.
I vote in favor.
Mr. Bragdon.
I vote in favor.
Mr. Calkins.
Yeah, I'm in favor.
Mr. Miller.
I vote in favor.
Madame Gill.
Pour.
For.
Mr. Johns.
For.
Mr. Chair, all yeas for the sub-amendment from Mr. Calkins.
Okay, we got that sub-amendment that way. Now, on the amendment proposed by Mr. Batiste. When you're ready, Nancy.
If there is no more debate, the vote would be on the amendment from Mr. Batiste. Mr. Batiste.
I vote in favor.
Thank you. Mr. Beach.
I vote in favor.
Monsieur Cormier.
Je vote pour.
I vote in favor.
Mr. Hardy.
I vote in favor.
Mr. Morrissey.
I vote in favor.
Mr. Arnold.
I vote in favor.
Mr. Bragdon.
I vote in favor.
Mr. Calkins,
In favor.
Mr. Mazer,
I vote in favor.
Madame Gill,
Je vote pour l'amendement.
I vote in favor of the amendment.
Mr. Johns.
I'm in favor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. All yeas.
Okay, thank you. Now we'll vote on the motion as amended and sub-amendment.
Well, Mr. Chair, there might
Oh.
be other amendments to the motion.
Oh, I'm sorry. Are there
may I
any
have
further
the-
discussions on the motion as amended?
If I may, do I have the floor, Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr. Calkins, you do.
Thank you, colleagues. If it would be considered worthwhile by colleagues at the table, I would simply suggest that we also add this in. After the words current rights and reconciliation agreement process, put in a comma and then add the text. Identify better ways to engage interested parties in order to improve communication, comma, reduce tensions, and prioritize conservation, comma. And if somebody would like me to speak to that proposed amendment, I'd be happy to do so, but I think it pretty much speaks for itself. I don't think it necessarily changes any of the intent of the mover of the motion, but I do think it's important that as members of the Fisheries and Oceans Committee, that we take a look at conservation. This is very consistent with the language that a multitude of ministers used today in their press conferences talking about this particular issue. And I don't think it, I think it adds to the value of the text of the motion and doesn't substantively change it in any way to the contrary of the intent of the motion mover.
Mr. Batiste.
To be honest, I just don't feel that the amendment as adds anything more. We have DFO and scientists that will speak to conservation. I just don't think that there's a need to muddy up what we've already just agreed to. And so I'm going to say that no, let's just get this over with.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I don't know why somebody would suggest that conservation of the natural resource is muddying the water. Like I say, I think the whole thing is a breakdown in communications. There's frustrations, there's tension in the communities. I would think that this would be a welcome change or amendment to the motion. Identify better ways to engage interested parties who would vote against engaging interested parties. Improving in communication, who would possibly want to vote against improving communication of interested parties? Reducing tension, is that not a goal of why we're doing this in the first place? And prioritizing conservation, if those are not goals of the or they're not consistent with the intent of this motion, then I guess I would have to question what the intent of the motion was in the first place.
Thank you, Mr. Calkins. Hearing no further discussion.
Mr. Chair, again, I believe Ms. Gill wants to speak here.
Madame Gill.
En fait, j'avais.
Well, I just wanted to, in fact, talk about conservation because I care very much about conservation of resources, of course, communication as well. But under the Marshall decision, there would be a way of circumventing rights that would be with a view to conservation management. And of course, we referred to senior officials, but we could have also specified scientists that, of course, are in charge of stock management and conservation of resources as well.
Thank you, Madam Gill. Seeing no further intervention, we'll vote on the amendment as proposed by Mr. Calkins. Nancy, when you're ready.
Actually, Mr. Chair, maybe I could ask Mr. Calkins to provide the full text again. I at the beginning, but not the end. Could you repeat the full sentence, please?
Certainly, certainly, Nancy. So I'll just say the whole thing, Nancy, because I don't know where you were at. So after the words rights and reconciliation agreement process, I would insert a comma, identify better ways to engage interested parties in order to improve communication, comma, reduce tensions, and prioritize conservation, comma, and then return to the text of the motion that goes on and identify issues and so on.
So to improve communication,
comma, reduce tensions, and prioritize conservation, comma.
thank you, Mr. Calkin.
Okay, we've all heard the text of the proposed amendment. Seeing no further interventions, Nancy will go to a vote on the amendment.
Mr. Chair, before I do that, can I have a quick communication with you?
Yes. We'll suspend for a moment. Get a vote, please.
So pursuant to the order from the House, the recorded vote would be on the new amendment from Mr. Calkins. Mr. Baptiste.
You're on mute.
I vote against.
Mr. Beach.
I vote no.
Monsieur Cormier.
Vote contre.
I vote against.
Mr. Hardy.
I vote against.
Mr. Morrissey.
Against.
Mr. Arnold.
I vote in favor of the motion.
Mr. Bragdon.
I vote in favor of the motion.
Mr. Calkins.
In favor.
Mr. Mazer,
Vote in favor.
Madame Gill,
Je vote pour la motion. Pour...
I vote in favor of the sub-amendment.
I vote in favor of the sub-amendment.
Mr. Chair, yeas, yes, 6, nays, no, 5, 5.
Okay, sub-amendment is passed. Now we'll go on to the vote of the motion as amended if there are no other further amendments. When you're ready, Nancy.
I see Madame Gill here.
Oh, okay. I apologize, Madam Gill. I don't. I depend on Nancy to let me know when you're.
No worries at all, Mr. Chair. No worries at all. No one's to blame. And I apologise because I cut you off earlier, Mr. Chair, without intending to do so. Well, this is an important amendment given the situation we're seeing played out, unfortunately still today, so that it be amended by including the following: a procedure to be followed. That the committee propose a definition of the notion of moderate livelihood, close quotation marks.
Okay, we've heard the context of the amendment. Hearing no discussion or seeing no sign of intervention. Nancy, if we could go to a vote on that amendment, please. Proposed amendment.
Mr. Chair, if we don't mind, could we just have it one more time? It was just read out once, so if we could have it a second time, the amendment.
Nancy, I don't know if you, yeah, okay.
Que la motion
that the motion be amended by adding, after the words a procedure to be followed or course of action, the words that the committee take advantage of this broad study to propose a definition of the notion of moderate livelihood, quote unquote.
Okay, everybody has heard the context of the amendment? Hearing or seeing.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Johns.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I don't think it's this committee's role to define a moderate livelihood. I think this is something that it's with the nation to define, with the Crown. They're defining it right now. And it's something that the Crown needs to accommodate. And I don't believe that this is the committee to do it. And I just wanted to add that I'll be voting against.
Okay, Mr. Beach, you had your hand up?
No, I think it was very well articulated by our colleague.
Okay, thank you. Hearing no further intervention, Nancy, will we do a vote?
If I could just add something. Yes, Ms. Gill. Now, if it isn't the committee's responsibility, then it isn't the Supreme Court's responsibility, which is calling on legislators to fill this legal and semantic void, if you will. So I think there'll need to be a discussion on this issue. The Department of Fisheries and Oceans is supposed to provide a framework to the Marshall decision since it came down. And what we've been experiencing in recent months has very much to do with the definition of the notion of moderate livelihood. So I think that that is at the actual crux of the tension that is being experienced. And the onus isn't on the Supreme Court, but who is the onus on? I'd ask Mr. Beach and Mr. Johns, where does the buck stop in terms of a definition of this notion?
Let's vote.
Mr. Chair, you are muted.
Now I've made the ultimate sin. Now, hearing no or seeing no further interventions, I'd ask for you to call the vote and record the vote on the amendment as proposed by Madam Gill.
On the amendment proposed by Madame Gill, Mr. Baptiste.
I vote against.
Mr. Beach,
I vote against.
Monsieur Cormier,
Je vote contre.
I vote against.
Mr. Hardy,
I vote against.
Mr. Morrissey,
I vote against.
Mr. Arnold,
I vote against.
Mr. Bragdon,
I vote against.
Mr. Calkins,
Against.
Mr. Major,
I vote against.
Madame Gill,
Je vote en faveur.
I vote in favor.
Mr. Johns,
We're voting on the sub-amendment. I just want clarity, correct? Yeah, I vote against.
it's from Madame Gill.
I vote against the sub-amendment.
Mr. Chair, yeas, yes, 1, nays, no. All the other ones.
Okay, so the sub-amendment as proposed is defeated. Before I go on, I would like to remind members that we have exhausted all the time that was allotted for committee today. But with, if I have the majority consent of members to extend, I believe we can extend for somewhat time frame. Nancy, I don't know if you can let us know if staff and interpreters are available for us to continue and for how long they'd be available, or can we agree on a length of time for the extension?
I believe so. I can verify that, Mr.
Okay, if you would, please.
Seems like it's good, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Nancy. Do I have unanimous consent, or do you want to go to a vote for extending? Mr. Beach?
Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to sit a while longer. However, I would note that there is an emergency debate coming up that some of us are planning to participate in. So depending on the will of the members, I would certainly be greatly appreciative if this was over before 3 p.m. Pacific time. That's my own view.
I believe that would be 7:30 here in Newfoundland, Labrador, or Newfoundland anyway. That would be a half-hour extension from here. Okay, I see no further intervention. So do we agree to extend for half an hour? Okay, half an hour it is, unanimous. I can't see Madam Gill, but I'm sure she would have hit a button or something to intervene if she was against that. So we'll push the time to 7:30 Newfoundland
Merci,
time.
Monsieur le Président, vous avez raison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You're entirely right in your surmising.
Yeah, I'm catching on. So we'll extend to 3 o'clock Pacific time or 6 o'clock Eastern time. Now we'll vote on the actual motion as amended. When you're ready, Nancy.
If there is no more debate, the recorded vote on the motion as amended. Mr. Baptiste,
I vote in favor.
Mr. Beach,
I vote in favor.
Monsieur Cormier,
Je vote pour.
I vote in favor.
Mr. Hardy,
I vote in favor.
Mr. Morrissey,
I vote in favor.
Mr. Arnold,
I vote in favor of the final motion.
Mr. Bragdon,
I vote in favor.
Mr. Calkins,
In favor.
Mr. Mazier,
Vote in favor.
Madame Gill, Mr. Johns,
Vote in favor.
yes, 11, 11.
Okay, Passed unanimously. And I know it's the intent of the committee, I guess, from hearing the motion, that we probably get started on this as soon as possible. So, Nancy, could we set a deadline for submission of proposed witnesses? Would it be appropriate to set that now?
It is up to the members and the committee to do.
Okay, is everybody okay with setting a deadline for the proposal of witnesses to take part in this study? Okay.
Une proposition pour vendredi.
What about Friday? That would be my proposal, says Ms. Gill.
Okay, Madam Gill proposes Friday as the deadline for proposed witnesses to this study. Is everybody okay with that?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr. Arnold.
If I could propose that next Tuesday, this is moving along fairly quickly. We've expanded the scope a little bit today on it. We can certainly start submitting witnesses prior to that, but I would ask for next Tuesday, the October 27th.
Okay, Mr. Arnold, you're suggesting stretch it out to next Monday for witnesses? Submission of list?
Next Tuesday, October the 27th.
Okay, that gives a week. Mr. Morrissey.
Mr. Chair, the whole intent of this motion was one of urgency. Now we're losing particular meeting time, but delaying witness next week. I'm sure we could come up with a couple of witnesses by tomorrow that would at least allow us to begin the meeting process. So could we, because of this meeting, the urgency, could we do a two-stage witness timeline? We submit by tomorrow. Everybody would know, can get names in by tomorrow, and then put a final deadline for next Tuesday in accordance with Mr. Arnold.
Okay, I see Mr. Arnold giving a thumbs up to that idea. So, Mr. Hardy.
Mr. Chair, given the number of meetings that are being proposed and given the urgency, I'm wondering if the committee would like to consider asking for an additional meeting next week on Wednesday.
Okay, we can certainly check or ask the clerk to check to see if we can get an available time on Wednesday, Mr. Hardy. I don't know if we could give an answer to that this evening. We probably wouldn't know, but I think what you're asking is that the clerk investigate the possibility of adding an additional meeting to our regular weekly meeting for next Wednesday at the appropriate time. That may be available. Mr. Morrissey.
And let's not overlook this Wednesday. This is urgent. Everybody has agreed to that on this committee, but if we keep delaying into next week, as the mover of the motion pointed out, this is something we have to get on with urgently so that we're sending a signal from this committee that it's serious about looking and hearing from the parties. And we should be moving on that as quickly as possible. I do not see why anybody would want to delay the process. So this Wednesday as well as next Wednesday, as well as could we get a clarification on if it's acceptable to the committee? I see Mr. Arnold agreed that we could submit the witnesses by tomorrow, which would allow us to have a meeting on Wednesday if we could, and then have a final date for witnesses next week as suggested by Mr. Arnold.
Okay, I think, Mr. Morrissey, everybody agrees with the two-stage witness list, initially by tomorrow, and then again by next Monday or Tuesday have the final list of witnesses. Depending on if we could get a meeting this Wednesday as well, again would depend on the clerk to check to see if the time is available and if we could get it on such short notice, and if indeed witnesses were available to appear, whether departmental officials or groups that have been identified that should be invited to appear.
Okay.
Yes, Mr. Arnold.
Mr. Chair, if I may, could we have an indication of how many witnesses in total and how many witnesses per party might be, how many slots might be available?
Okay, I think that would depend on how far out. I think we'd like to see an initial witness list, I think, to determine the number of days that this is going to take. I wouldn't want to say that each party get 4 or 3 or 2 or 6 without seeing the actual witness list, and then we can determine how many meetings we actually will. I know that Mr. Batista, I think, originally said 5 meetings, but we may find that we can do it in 4 once we see the witness list, or we may see that we have to go to 6 to make it more inclusive. I think everybody would be in agreement to that. Okay, so I guess the
Ms. Gill here, Mr. Chairman. Well, I would have liked to know, as far as tomorrow is concerned, well, it's not at 3 p.m. Pacific time, but until what time tomorrow will we have to put a finger on our witnesses? The actual deadline in terms of the specific hour. But obviously I agree with the general notion.
How about 5 p.m. Eastern time? Would that be okay, Madam Gill?
Yes, it would.
Hearing nothing, I'll assume it is.
Ms. Gill is nodding her head. Yes, I agree. 100%, Mr. Chair. 100%.
Initial list by 5 p.m. tomorrow, and the final list by, again, 5 p.m. the following Tuesday. Okay, and we'll leave it to the clerk to see if we can get a meeting time for this Wednesday and next Wednesday as an additional time slot in these 2 weeks. And I would leave it to the clerk to see if witnesses can be available in those time frames from the list that she gets tomorrow. So try and get them in as early as you can. Don't leave it to the last minute. So as if the time slot is available for this Wednesday, we can get witnesses lined up and get this study actually started. That seem reasonable to you, Madam Clerk?
We'll do whatever the committee tells me. It's good for me if it's good for the committee.
Okay. So, seeing how we have that issue, I think, dealt with, I'll go back to my original speaker list for starting the time that we may have left. Mr. Hardy.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to go back to the notice of motion that I put forward last week, which has now been distributed in both official language. I don't know, do I need to read it all out again?
You probably should read it into the record, yes.
Okay, here we go then. That pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and given the decline in Pacific salmon stocks and the ongoing situation with Big Bar landslide, the committee undertake a study on the state of Pacific salmon and make recommendations on next steps to ensure for the long-term health of these stocks, as well as the commercial, indigenous, and recreational fisheries that depend on them. That this study consists of at least 6 meetings, with 2 of those meetings focused on the Big Bar slide. That the committee call witnesses, including senior department officials, First Nations, and relevant stakeholder groups to testify before the committee. That the committee report to the House. That the committee reintroduce all testimony and submissions on this subject from the first session of the 43rd Parliament to be included and used for considering and drafting a report. And that all previous committee meetings on this subject be considered as meetings as part of this study as outlined in this motion. I'd add perhaps to shorten the time frame to deal with this one. I'm aware that Mel had 2 motions that relate to this that if he's agreeable, I would accept those as friendlies to be included because they certainly flesh out what we're intending to do.
Okay, we've heard the motion. Mr. Arnold, you want to comment as you were?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I have 2 amendments to the motion, and I think they will improve and clarify the motion. So the first amendment would be that in its remaining meetings studying the Pacific salmon, the committee invite witnesses from British Columbia's salmon farming industry to provide testimony on actions currently being taken by the sector to reduce impacts on wild salmon, and witnesses from DFO to provide an update on recently published risk assessments related to open net pen aquaculture.
Okay, we've heard the amendment as proposed. Any discussion to that?
I'd like to hear the motion again. I'm sorry. I around DFO officials, or did he say any? Can we add, Mr. Arnold? Would you be open to an amendment to add, or any relevant stakeholders? Because I think that would be important to not just hear from department officials, but others.
With your pleasure, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Arnold.
We have heard from stakeholders on the one side of the net pen aquaculture, but we haven't heard from the aquaculture sector themselves. But if you felt there was other witnesses may need to be included, those could probably be in there. So I will read it out again. That in its remaining meetings studying the Pacific salmon, the committee invite witnesses from British Columbia's salmon farming industry to provide testimony on actions currently being taken by the sector to reduce impacts on wild salmon, and witnesses from DFO to provide an update on the recently published risk assessments related to open net pen aquaculture.
Okay, we've heard the proposed amendment. Seeing no further discussion, can we please vote on the amendment as proposed?
I believe Madam Gill has.
Oh, Madam Gill.
Ou en fait, c'est simplement une question de
Well, just a clarification here, please. You're saying that these witnesses will be taking part in the mandatory meetings that we had already slated. This isn't an addition. This is part and parcel of the already scheduled meetings, correct?
Correct.
So hearing no further discussion, we'll vote on the proposed amendment, Nancy.
So on the amendment by Mr. Arnold, Mr. Baptiste,
You're on mute.
Mr. Baptiste, you are on mute.
Can you maybe give us a thumbs up or something, Mr. Baptiste, because you're remaining on mute. Okay, thumbs up means in favor. Okay. Nancy, you're on mute.
Sorry, Mr. Beach.
In favor.
Monsieur Cormier.
Vote pour.
I vote in favor.
Mr. Hardy.
In favor. In favor.
Mr. Morrissey.
In favor.
Mr. Arnold.
Of course, I have to be in favor.
Mr. Bragdon.
In favor.
Mr. Calkins.
In favor.
Mr. Mazier.
In favor.
Madame Gill.
pour.
4.
Mr. Johns.
4.
Mr. Chair, 11 yeas, 11 yes.
The amendment is adopted to the motion. Hearing no further amendments, can we vote on the motion?
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to
Mr.
put forward an amendment, and I hope that Mr. Hardy will agree to it on the motion.
Mr. Speaker, I did mention at the opening that I had 2 amendments. I have the second one ready as well.
Yes, you did, Mr. Arnold. We'll get right back to you, Mr. Johns, after Mr. Arnold is actually finished.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. The first one went over fairly smoothly. I hope the second one is just as smooth. Second amendment was that at the end that the motion that the Pacific Salmon Study incorporate the committee's examination and recommendations related to the Big Bar Slide study and undertaken in the first session of the 43rd Parliament in the final report. I'll read that once more a little slower. That the Pacific Salmon Study incorporate the committee's examination and recommendations related to the Big Bar landslide study undertaken in the first session of the 43rd Parliament in the final report.
Mr. Hardy, you want to speak to that amendment?
Yes, if it will speed things up, I'm happy to have that as a friendly amendment so that we don't have to take the time to vote on it, if we could do that.
All right, Mr. Johns, did you have your hand up to speak to that, or are you waiting to make an additional amendment afterward?
Additional amendments.
Okay, well, we'll get to that shortly. Hearing no further discussion on the proposed amendment by Mr. Arnold, and I know Mr. Hardy has indicated that he's willing to accept that amendment to his original motion. Nancy, do we need to do a vote, or can we call for unanimous consent?
For the second amendment by Mr. Arnold, I believe it was insinuated in the motion by Mr. Hardy that that whatever was heard on the Big Bar would be part of the report. Is it the consent of the members to agree to that? It is.
Seeing all thumbs up. Okay. Now, Mr. Johns.
Mr. Speaker, and I hope Mr. Hardy would agree that we need to hear from Indigenous knowledge when it comes to this study, and I don't believe we've in depth listened to Indigenous communities and Indigenous leaders, and I would like to see 2 additional meetings dedicated to Indigenous knowledge when it comes to Pacific wild salmon, given that it's the bedrock species and it's obviously the cornerstone of their culture for coastal First Nations. So I'm hopeful that this committee would support an amendment to include 2 additional meetings to embody and encompass and listen for prioritizing Indigenous knowledge into this conversation.
Mr. Hardy.
We had scoped out some of the ground that we wanted to cover. We thought that would take 2 meetings. So just to be clear, Mr. Johns, you would want 2 additional meetings, so a total of 4 more meetings to conclude this study.
That's correct.
So can I, as there's no discussion wanted, can I ask if we have unanimous consent to accept the amendment by Mr. Johns to add 2 additional meetings? I see thumbs up. All right, unanimous consent it is. Now, we should probably vote on the motion as amended. So, Nancy, when you're ready. You're on mute.
So again, Mr. Chair, it is the motion as amended, and if there's consent of the committee, then I will not proceed to record a vote.
Okay, do we have unanimous consent of committee? And you'll have to let me know, Madam Gill, if you're in favor of that as well, because I can't see you on the screen.
Yes, I am.
Oui.
Okay. All right. We have unanimous consent. The motion is adopted as amended. Thank you, everyone. Now on my speaker list, number 3, Mr. Mazier.
Hey, everybody can hear me good? I want to bring forward a motion. I have 2 motions today. The first one, that pursuant to Standing Order 108, paragraph 2, the committee undertake a study of at least 2 meetings to identify the impact of Indigenous freshwater Fish Marketing Limited Partnership initiative, whereby the Freshwater Marketing Corporation transitions from a harvester-led partnership model. That the committee call witnesses, including senior departmental officials from the Department of Fisheries and Oceans and interested stakeholder groups to testify, including commentary on sustainability and regulation of the commercial freshwater fishing industry, and that the committee report its conclusions and recommendations to the House. That's the first motion. I can't hear you. You're on mute.
Mr. Chair, I do have a copy of the motion in the 2 languages that I could distribute to the members.
Okay, if you could, Nancy, that would be great.
Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Chairman, if I may. Yes, could we just suspend just for a couple of seconds so that I can see which motion we're talking about and see the French version? Would that be okay?
Yes, that's fine. I understand the clerk is going to send this out in both official languages, but I will let everyone know we have approximately 3 minutes left for committee. Time left to do much in the way of debate or moving another motion. So I suggest anybody with motions to come forward. We'll deal with it at committee business the next time go around. And we'll vote on this motion when we come back to our next meeting. So wish everybody a good evening.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr. Calkins.
Thank you for your adept handling of the committee today. But just so we're clear, are you committing to having committee business on the agenda for the next meeting, regardless of what the next meeting has?
That will be up to the committee.
So I mean, you basically just deferred, Chair. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, sir. But you basically just told my colleague that we don't have time today to deal with his issues, and the next time we'll be able to deal with this is at committee business. And I'm just looking for a commitment from you, Chair, that committee business will be on the agenda at the next meeting, regardless of whether or not we're hearing from witnesses. If we can take 5 or 10 minutes to deal with these motions, it's important. I'm just looking for that clarification, sir.
Okay, I think I'll ask for consent to the committee to probably carve off the last 10 or 15 minutes if we get a 2-hour session to deal with this motion or deal with committee business at the end of the meeting, if we get, especially if we get an extra time on this Wednesday. All right, seeing all thumbs up, good to go. Again, thank you, everyone. And
thank you all.
Hopefully we'll do a bit better with the mute and unmute next time. And hopefully when the clerk checks on it, we can add an additional meeting on Wednesday coming. And please get in your witnesses to the clerk as soon as possible. Good evening, everyone. We now stand adjourned.
Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Ken.